Hey everybody, Eric Rennie here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. And Philippe, we are now a little bit in the aftermath of the budget vote, and we now can plan the rest of our lives rather than being on
That's right.
tenterhooks for the next few weeks. How are you feeling these days?
Feeling like we're 1 month away from Christmas, and I cannot wait to be on break. My college semester is going well, but at this time of year, you know, the energy is a bit lower, the enthusiasm on the student side as well, not just me. And so looking forward to the break, but we still have tons to look forward to before the end of the year. So where do you want to start today? We didn't have that many polls in the last 7 days. We do have some data to deconstruct, and I'll have a quiz for you later in this episode. I did have many messages from our subscribers and listeners who said, hey, when is the quiz coming back? I think it's been 3 weeks. It's coming back today, my friends. So where do you want to start today?
Well, like you said, we don't have that many new polls to talk about. So we do have some on the NDP leadership race that we'll get to. We have the new Nanos poll out this week. And I do want to start, I think, with there and with some of the news that is emerging this week. So it's been reported, and maybe there's even more details by the time you're listening to this, that the federal government and Alberta are close to coming to some sort of an agreement that would have an exchange of a relaxation of some environmental restrictions on the part of the feds in exchange for heightening of some on the part of Alberta, and in exchange kind of working towards getting a pipeline out to the Pacific coast. We don't really have a huge amount of details just yet.
Not yet.
And we don't really know what this means and where BC sits in all of this, because geography is a little bit of an issue here. Now, I think that one of the angles that I find interesting, and one that I think that you and I can discuss, is that for the Liberals, this could be seen as a choice between Alberta and British Columbia, the voters in Alberta and British Columbia. If we put aside any discussion of, you know, what it means for the economy, what it means for the environment, whether it's actually a good idea or not, but just in terms of the electoral impact of this, which is more in our wheelhouse, it's an odd choice. It's an interesting choice for the Liberals. What is it? It's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see how it works out, or if anybody gets the meme. But I don't know, Philip. What do you think about this?
Well,
should the Liberals be choosing Alberta over British Columbia, or the voters in that province?
Okay, well, I'll say this. If it seems this way for us, it may seem this way for many voters, although it may not be. I mean, we'll look at the conditions, right? But it's true that the current government in BC is mostly opposed to this hypothetical pipeline to the north coast, and as well as I think many First Nations are opposed to it. The question is, what are the conditions for it to happen? Is this like a deal that will lead to nowhere? That the federal government can say, well, at least we made a deal with Alberta, it just didn't pan out. So I do not want to pretend to be an expert on pipeline politics, but if we focus just on the numbers and the electoral politics, the Liberals won 2 seats in Alberta. They were close in a couple of them, right? But they won 2 seats. They won 20 seats in BC. And you and I talked about this after the election. Eric, when was the last time the federal Liberals won 20 seats in BC? The answer is never. It's never happened. And so, and if you look at the map of BC, the federal map of BC, all of the Liberal seats, there were 2 on Vancouver Island, almost all of them in the Vancouver area, and one of them in, I think it was Kelowna. Yes, it was Kelowna. So none of this, I mean, they're all urban seats. Kelowna is a smaller city, but still, it's a city. So on the path of this hypothetical pipeline, there is no Liberal seat. So I do not know what the strategy is electorally here, because it seems like a loser. But we did have some numbers from the English Street Institute in October. We'll delve into that. But what about you, Eric? How do you see this electorally, this hypothetical deal with Danielle Smith?
Well, there's 2 different issues here. One is the regional, local kind of reaction to things, and that we can kind of make some assumptions, but they might prove to be wrong. But certainly we do see that the provincial government is not very happy about this in British Columbia. And if that is something that continues, then that could color the reaction that British Columbians have. Now, David Eby and the NDP is not everybody's cup of tea in BC, but the Liberals and the BC NDP share a lot of the same voters. So
They
if
do.
a lot of those British Columbians kind of follow in David Eby's approach in terms of the reaction to this, then there could be some blowback. On the other hand, Mark Carney's whole brand is about building infrastructure for the country and trying to diversify our trade partners and focus on the economy. And so the building of a pipeline to try to do that might be also something that is welcomed by some of the Liberals' base as well. So those two things, I think, are going to be, in a way, fighting against each other. It's also possible that they come to some sort of compromise where everybody's happy, but also compromise could mean nobody's happy. But I do think that these things it's not as cut and dry as it might seem. Pipeline, good Alberta. Pipeline, bad BC. Liberals choosing 2 seats over 20. There is going to be it's going to be a lot more nuanced than that.
So the Angus Reid poll from October, I think we mentioned it in October, but we didn't make a big fuss about it. Fielded October 7 to 9, so it's a month and a half ago. It's not that long ago. The question is pretty simple. Generally, do you support or oppose the idea of an oil pipeline from Alberta to BC traveling through northern BC? That's the question. Nationally, 59% support, 26% oppose. So that's a pretty clear result, right? And when you look at the regionals, we're obviously interested in the British Columbia result. Support, 56%, oppose 33%. This is almost a 2-to-1 in favor. You would have to think that the federal Liberals and Mr. Carney would have had some polling numbers on this before making an announcement. Now, again, we do not know what the details of the deals are yet. There could be tons of condition that would make this project almost undoable. But these numbers suggest that opposition to the pipeline is not that strong, even in BC. I mean, 33% is a lot, but it's almost 2-to-1 in favor of building this pipeline. Again, regardless of what you think of the impact it would have on the economy and the environment. So, strange choice, but perhaps when we see what the deal is and what the conditions are, it will make more sense.
I do think that, obviously they run some risk, right? You said there is 33% opposition. Not going to be a lot of conservative voters in BC among that 33. It's going to be primarily Greens and New Democrats, and then and some Liberals. So there is obviously a chance of a blowback for the Liberals to try to fight with the Conservatives for that 56% in BC is probably a losing proposition, right? Because it's not even enough if they got half of it. But when you do look at the map, you do kind of wonder, because if the Liberals did lose some voters in British Columbia over this, it wouldn't be to the Conservatives, right? So it's not that they would lose seats to the Conservatives because votes would go over to the Conservatives. It would be that votes would probably go over to the NDP and drop the Liberals behind the Conservatives in some of those lower mainland seats. But I guess the question is whether that would be enough, whether that would actually cost them seats, and if they actually do have some opportunity to make up for some of those potential losses in Alberta.
Oh God,
we've seen a few polls with some unrealistically high numbers for the Liberals in Alberta, but they're not that far from turning 2 seats into 6. So could you imagine that there is actually some electoral upside, that if they pick up an extra seat or 2 in Calgary, an extra seat or 2 in Edmonton, and maybe only lose 1 or 2 seats in BC, that they could actually come out ahead on this. That you could see that calculation working out for the Liberals, even though it's a lot to bank on that. The Liberals will win the most seats in Alberta since before.
Would be 68, right?
Before Trudeau was a thing,
Yeah, exactly. Trudeau won also. Yeah. In this poll, the same poll, just to your point, Eric, in favor among conservative voters, 88 against 5. So that's pretty clear. Liberals, 44 in favor, 36 against. So that's kind of close. I think Liberal voters, these are 20-25 Liberal voters are divided. NDP voters, 24, 61 against. So this is not BC voters. We don't have the double crosstabs of voting intentions and also of BC. It's just what you said here. If the Liberals are banking on winning 3-4 more seats in Alberta to offset the losses in BC, this is a huge and risky bet, because many conservatives would just say, okay, thank you, we have a pipeline, we're still not going to vote for you. We're going to vote for the Conservatives, who would not try to navigate a deal with tons of conditions. We're just going to buy the pipeline and build it. So yeah, I'm a bit surprised by these results, I have to say. Also, there's a huge gender gap. Would you be surprised? Among men, it's plus 50. 71 approve, 21 disapprove. Among women, it's plus 15. So it's still in the positive. But again, this is just the English Free Institute. I wish we had more polls. Perhaps there is out there, but I didn't see anything recent that would specifically ask about the Northern BC hypothetical pipeline. Big risk for the Liberals. They must have internal numbers that we haven't seen yet, because otherwise, like, if he's trying to win a majority, that's not the way to do it. Let's just say that's a risky way to do it. So anyway,
we have to also take into account the possibility of some effects outside of those two provinces.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And there's two different things that could be a conflict here. If it is just part of the economic management trying to advance Canada's diversification, maybe that helps in Ontario. Maybe that helps them win some of the seats that were pretty close in the GTA, because it just adds to the economic bona fides for Mark Carney. Or you have maybe some environmentalists in Quebec who would not be happy to see the Liberals moving this direction, and that costs them a few seats, goes to the Bloc or whatever. It is there. Politics in Canada are very regionalized, but they're not. Yeah. They're not exclusive to those regions, right? No. So it'll be really interesting to see what the announcements and what it means really comes to. But also the polls over the next little while, whether we do see any movement in Alberta, in British Columbia, and in the rest of the country. I'm sure that already some of the pollsters are in the field, or at least are figuring out some questions that they're going to ask over the next week or two about this. So I'm sure we'll have some actual hard data to discuss in the next little while.
This is also right up the alley of Yves-François Blanchet. You know Yves-François Blanchet, when he talks about Canada being a petrostate? And it's obviously an exaggeration with some parts of truth in it, but it's obviously an exaggeration. This plays right into his hands. And you could see 5, 6, maybe more Liberal seats that were won by very small margins in suburban Montreal. They were won by the Liberals. They go back to the Bloc with this. So I do not know. But again, we'll see the details of the deal and we'll have better judgments. We're just focusing on the electoral dynamics here. It's politicians should not focus only on electoral dynamics, right? They should, focus on what's good for the country, what's good for the economy and everything. So perhaps they do have data that we don't. But I'll reserve judgment until I see the deal. But it is a strange one, for sure.
One of the pieces of data we do have, we have that Nanos poll. We'll just spend just a minute on that one. So we got 42% for the Liberals, 37% for the Conservatives, 9% for the NDP. Yeah. This is a wider gap we've seen between the Liberals and the Conservatives from Nanos for a couple, maybe a month and a half. Yeah. But it does kind of align with some of the other polls we've seen. And also this is Nanos was one of the last pollsters, or one of the only pollsters to have the NDP in double digits. Now they have them back to 9%. So that's right. A little bit of coming down to earth for them.
Absolutely. So the 42-37 is the biggest gap since we have to go to early September. We expect fluctuations, but this poll has been so stable. We've seen 38-40, we've seen 39-37 for the past 2 months, and now half of this sample has been fielded since the budget. So is this a budget effect? Too early to tell. But it could be. The thing is, if the movement had been on the other way, if we had seen 41 Conservative and 39 Liberal, I think we would have said, oh, maybe the budget hasn't gone too well for the Liberals. So we'll wait to see whether the movement stays for a few weeks. But also the preferred PM tracker, which I think we've been following since the election. We had a little bit of a tightening in this tracker in October.
Tightening is a very generous term.
Instead of 27 points, it was 19. But now it's back up to 27 points. So Mark Carney at 53%, up 4 points since the previous 4-week sample from Nanos. And so that's outside of Mo. And Pierre Poilievre is at 26. So really what we should take out of this is that Mark Carney is the choice of more Canadians than just those who vote Liberal. Because this includes undecideds, right? Whereas Pierre Poilievre gets 26 in this poll, excluding undecideds, the Conservatives have 37. So it's about the same core of people. Pierre Poilievre does not get support outside of his base, whereas Mark Carney does. This is the big difference. And 27-point gap, it has grown again. It has grown by 5 points in a month. This is significant. We'll see. Well, I mean, I think, did we make a little bet, a little over-under? Will Mark Carney stay above 50% come Christmas? I think we had done that a few weeks ago. And I said, well, surely not. Well, we're a month away from Christmas. He's at 53, so we'll see.
I mean, Pierre Poilievre has got to be lobbying for Nanos to get rid of this question because it's the one that everybody talks about, right? That there's this gap, and you got to think that he also must be pulling his hair out, because you would think that an incumbent prime minister in for so long, making decisions not without some controversy, that his numbers would go down. Even if Poilievre can't get his numbers up, at least he could close the gap, because Carney's are going down. Instead, they go up.
Yeah.
He can't catch a break. He didn't have a good couple weeks, and didn't necessarily mean that Carney's numbers were going to go up, but that's actually what happened. So we'll see if that continues. Again, Nanos goes up and down quite a bit, but it is still a 27-point gap, so that's a big one.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's get to the NDP polls that came out over the last little while. So we had two polls, both from former Liberals, we should say. Polera,
that's right.
Polera's heads up their polling is Dan Arnold, who used to poll for Justin Trudeau's Liberals in 2015, 2019, 2021, doing interesting work now with Polera. And then Alex Kohut, who was Dan Arnold's replacement, who is now on his own. He has the North Poll, which he puts out on his Substack, so you could check that out. He has some interesting stuff. Also polling about the NDP. So these are two pollsters who might not be NDP friendly, but they know how to do some polling. So the poll from Polera is a bit older. It was from mid-October, so it's now a month and a half. But there are some findings I think that are worth discussing. And then the North Poll one that came out was done earlier this month. I mean, there's the biggest finding out of all of these is that nobody is really paying attention or aware of these candidates. And that seems like a big problem for the NDP.
It's a big problem for the NDP, but Eric, it's also a big problem for pollsters, because it's hard to get a big sample. Again, the NDP had 6% of the votes. So when you have a poll of 1,000 people, that's 60 people. You cannot then split into regions and age. It doesn't work. There's just not enough data. And so you need a really big poll to have enough NDP supporters, respondents, and then we're not talking about members here. We're just talking about supporters. So it's tough for pollsters. It's tough for the NDP. Speaking of which, the NDP has is it the first debate? Because I know they have a debate this week. It's in Montreal. I think it's on
the first
Thursday.
official one run by the party. They had some sort
That's
of
right.
forum earlier on that was run by, I think, the Labour Congress or something.
Yeah, that's right. So it's the first official. So at the eve of this, almost eve of this first debate, we see that the enthusiasm from voters is not quite there. It's not entirely surprising. There's no star candidate. No offense to the candidates that are there, but none of them are national stars. Would you agree with that? I'm not insulting anyone. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to ask you your thoughts on this poll, but something that the first table from the North Poll is, what is your impression of the following people? And there's a table. Mark Carney, has a good number, 53% favorable, 38% unfavorable. And then he has Zoran Mamdani. You may have heard of him. New York City mayor. 16% favorable. And that number is higher than Heather McPherson, Eva Lewis, Rob Ashton. So I know it's been in the media a lot, but it's still the mayor of a city in another country that has a higher...
who no one had heard of 6 months ago? 3 months ago?
So, okay, so what is your
maybe that's
take?
depressing about Canadian news coverage. But,
I know, right?
So just to go through some of the numbers, in terms of name recognition, Pollara found, and they tested Jagmeet Singh as kind of a control. So 82% of Canadians knew Jagmeet Singh, knew who he was, at least to some extent. It was only 20% for Heather McPherson, 16% for Avi Lewis, and 14% for Rob Ashton. So not a lot. The North Pole asked something kind of similar, asked favorable, unfavorable, and it got 67% who were completely unaware of Heather McPherson, 72% for Avi Lewis, and Ashton had also very high unrecognized numbers. So we're talking about only a small amount of people who really know who these folks are. And even when we're talking about NDP voters, because the North Pole did break it down by people who would vote NDP, it was only a sample of 95, but also people who would be open to voting for the NDP. So these are people who at least would consider the party. Yeah. And you still had that Carney was far more known. Mamdani was far more known. And I mean, the candidates were relatively well seen, usually like 2-to-1 favorable versus unfavorable.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if there's any strong numbers from it that you can say we got some real front runners or not.
What you just said, many of them are well seen, well perceived, more favorables than unfavorable. That is true and fair, but we do have to add an asterisk. Because for the longest time, Jagmeet Singh was the preferred party leader in the favorables. But he was not competitive to be a prime minister. He was not a threat to the status quo. And when the Liberals went down, and suddenly in the projections and in the polling, we saw the Liberals almost tied with the NDP, you saw Jagmeet Singh's number go down. So when you're not perceived as competitive, I think many voters view, okay, that's kind of cute. That's they view yourself more favorably. So none of these numbers are encouraging. None of these numbers really tell us who's leading in the race, right? I think you said the best indicator would be to see the fundraising, and we're going to have more of that in the coming weeks. But for now, you would have to think that the top two would be McPherson and Lewis, but that's only my impressions, and that's only me following the news. Perhaps Rob Ashton is less known, so perhaps among members he's more popular, but we don't have no data on this.
North Pole did ask if you could vote, who would you vote for? And there wasn't really a big difference between those who were voting NDP and those who said they were open to voting NDP. So if you look at the larger sample open to voting for the NDP, McPherson was leading with 20%, and then it was Ashton with 9% and Lewis with 8%. And McQuail and Johnston both had 4%. So McPherson does seem to be benefiting from some higher recognition. She is the most well-known. But even that's not much of a saying much. And when you added like the second choices, it got a bit closer or didn't really clarify things. McPherson is still ahead, but the people who vote for the NDP are not the people who are going to be voting for the leader, so we can't really draw conclusions to this. So I think what we can say is these folks have to get better known, and maybe McPherson would be the front runner because of her name recognition, but within the membership, the members know who these people are, right? And so I don't know if it adds that much cachet to their name. So
in the Pollara poll, we have some regionals, right? And we see McPherson having a 31% in Alberta against 17% for Lewis and 17% also for Ashton. I think we don't have the regional distribution of all the members, but we know there's a fair bit in Alberta. So this could be a difference. In Ontario, it was almost a three-way tie, 22% McPherson, 20% Lewis, 16% Ashton. Not a big... this is a familiarity, of course. This is not voting intentions, but not a big difference there. This race is probably going to be decided west of Ontario anyway. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we'll go to just something happening east of Ontario.
Right.
Now, we are expecting to have some new numbers out of Quebec soon.
Very soon.
We
Yes.
saw Léger posting about it on social media that they were doing something, and I know you often go into the field as well through Palace. But we don't really have numbers to talk about. We just have events, and I think we just, because they're pretty momentous events, I would say, or at least they've been dominating news coverage.
They have.
So we got some turmoil within the Quebec Liberals. We got some turmoil within Quebec Solidaire. First, just two little comments. First off, one, Paul Saint Pierre Plamondon had a bit of a rougher week because some worse polling numbers came out for the PQ and for Sovereignty. That gets knocked off the table pretty quick. And also, no one's talking about the CAQ, which is usually a good day for the CAQ. So anyway, why don't you first lay out what has actually been happening?
And today at the National Assembly, today is, of course, Tuesday, November 25th, Éric Girard, the finance minister, will table the economic update, and nobody's talking about it because of what's going on with the Liberals in Quebec Solidaire. So we have very little information. We know there's something happening that's shaking up the Quebec Liberals. Marois Risky, who was the parliamentary leader chosen by Pablo Rodriguez, because Pablo Rodriguez doesn't have a seat in the National Assembly, so she was the official, the leader of the official opposition in the National Assembly. Well, she fired her chief of staff, which was handpicked by Pablo Rodriguez. And then, we don't know the reason, and then a big kerfuffle of lawsuits or threatened lawsuits came out in the media. We obviously do not have the details of what happened, but Marois Risky has been suspended from the Liberal caucus, which, and by the way, she was the most known Liberal MNA by a long stretch, most appreciated as well when you look at Léger polling. So the leadership of Monsieur Rodriguez has been put into question. There are some rumblings among Liberal members that they think, did we make the wrong choice here with Monsieur Rodriguez? And so we will have numbers on this and more explanations, we believe, in the next few days. That's all I can say. And as for Québec Solidaire, Vincent Marissal, the Rosemont MNA, who joined the Québec Solidaire in 2018 and won Rosemont twice. Actually, he was the one who beat Jean-François Lisée in Rosemont. Was negotiating with the Parti québécois to cross the floor. And Québec Solidaire found out about it, and they fired him from the caucus. But he said, I was going to quit anyway, the QS caucus. So I think it was one columnist in Quebec who called it, Vincent Marissal slammed the door that he was directed to. Like, just get out of here, and he slammed the door. We do not know where this will lead. Obviously, Québec Solidaire hasn't had any good news in quite a bit. The polls are terrible. Many of their incumbents are not running again. And many of the seats that they won in 2022, they won 11, then a 12th one during a by-election, are in danger of being taken by both the Liberals and the Parti québécois. So lots happening, but again, we will wait to see numbers on this, and they should come in the next few days.
It's interesting that the PQ is considering taking Vincent Marissal because I'm pretty sure they haven't been all that open to any other floor crossers. I'm sure there's lots of CQ MNAs who are wondering if maybe the PQ could be a lifeboat for them, and the PQ is not interested. And then within the Liberals, I mean, there's also that story about the allegations and texts that have been published by the Journal de Montréal that suggest there was at least some people who were trying to buy votes in Quebec. And as we mentioned in our bonus episode last week, not illegal in Quebec. It's an oversight in the election law that while you certainly can't buy a vote in an election, a leadership race does not have a rule against it. So it's more, I guess, the fact that it would be unethical and immoral, not illegal, which is the worst offense, I guess. But anyway, so that is a whole thing that the Liberals are having to deal with as well. Lots of allegations going around. The people who have been implicated in it are suing, trying to sue the media that have suggested that they're involved. But the details are probably less important than the fact that it just seems like a mess for a party that had seemingly been closing the gap on the PQ, maybe making the next election into something more competitive than we had expected. And instead, the Liberals have had to spend the week talking about themselves, which is always a bad thing when you're an opposition party.
The allegations of vote buying, by the way, you just said something. It's not illegal in Quebec, but there is a framework in the Electoral Quebec. It cannot be more than $500.
It's got to be reasonable.
And the money has to be fundraised legally. But you can make a donation to someone in exchange for their vote, which is insane when you think about it, right? This is something it's a hole that will be plugged soon. You can't imagine this being. But these are, though, allegations. They're not proven. It's just that the allegations themselves do enough damage to the Liberal brand. So we'll get back on that. Again, there's so much that it's been getting media coverage from wall to wall, but they all repeat the tidbits that we do know, and it's not that much. So I guess at some point we're going to shed some lights on this. But in the meantime, the other parties are quite happy that the Liberals are fighting among themselves. So 1 year before an election in Quebec. Well, less than 1 year now. So
it's time's running out, that's for sure. All right, it's the much awaited return of the quiz.
That's right. Okay.
So you've got a quiz for me and for our listeners and viewers as well. So what do you got in store?
Okay, the format is, I'm not reinventing the wheel. We know this format. So I have 3 clues, 4 politicians. If you get it after the first clue, 3 points. If you get it after the second clue, 2 points. If you get it after the third clue, 1 point. If you don't get it, 0 points. So maximum of 12 points. There is a theme here.
Okay.
The theme is unclear on purpose. You will discover as we go along what the theme is. But I can tell you that the theme is 18. The number 18. Okay?
Okay.
So where should we put gold here? So let's say you get all 4 of them on a second clue. That would be 8 points. I think gold should be 9 points.
Okay. That's fair.
Silver is 8. Bronze is 7. If you get to 6, I will give you a bonus question for a chance to medal. But below that, it is shame. So,
okay.
Are you ready, my friend?
I am.
Okay. And it's just politicians. Okay. So let's go. First person, Eric. This person was born in 1929 at the Toronto General Hospital. He was interested in politics at a young age, as he became the youngest delegate to attend a national progressive conservative convention in Canada. He graduated from Osgoode Hall Law School in 1954 and was called to the Bar of Ontario in 1955.
Okay.
You get a free guess per clue, of course.
Yeah. So 29. So once he would get into politics, he'd probably be at least in the 60s, maybe the 70s. I don't know. I'm going to guess it was Ontario Premier Bill Davis.
Ah, Jesus Christ. You get 3 points. How do you know that? That's impossible. By the way,
I don't know. I just put it all together in terms of the timing and everything. What were the 2 other clues? I'm
going to give you the other clues, but you get 3 points. It is Bill Davis. My goodness. This person was first elected to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in the 1959 provincial election in the riding of Peel. He was just 29 years old. In 1962, he was appointed as Minister of Education in the John Robarts cabinet. And the third clue is in the Ontario PC leadership race to succeed Robarts in 1971, this person defeated rival candidate Alan Lawrence on the final ballot and became the 18th Premier of Ontario.
Okay.
So, okay, well, that's not very nice, Eric. You don't let our listeners play the game. So anyway, Bill Davis.
I mean, that one was a guess. I would have guessed Davis after Peel because he was kind of famously from Brampton. So,
okay, very well. Second person now. You have 3 points. Eric, this person was born in 1968 in Oakville, Ontario, and was raised in Saskatchewan, where he attended high school in the town of Wilcox. After studying south of the border, he returned to Canada to work for the Saskatchewan Liberal Party.
So he was born in 1968. Saskatchewan for the Liberals. Geez, I don't know. Saskatchewan Liberal.
Should I just go on, or?
I don't know. It's the timing won't work out, but I'll just say Ralph Goodale. No.
Well, I think he's older than that, though. No offense, Mr. Goodale. Okay, clue number 2 for 2 points. In his federal political career, this person was elected under the Reform, the Canadian Alliance, and the Conservative banner. After nearly 20 years as a federal MP, he moved on to provincial politics.
So he was a Reform, a PC...
a Canadian Alliance, and Conservative.
And then went on the provincial. It could be a number of people. I don't want to get it on the first go if it's just a wild guess. But I'm just going to guess Jason Kenney.
And Jason Kenney is the correct answer. Okay. So 2 points. Wow. Good for you, Eric. Okay, the third clue was, as of this writing, this person was the last leader of the Alberta Progressive Conservative Party and served as the 18th Premier of Alberta. And I say as of this writing because we don't know. The Progressive Conservatives could make a return in Alberta. It's not.
Sorry, I got confused. I thought we were on a different one. So wait, he started as a Saskatchewan Liberal?
Yeah, working for Ralph Goodale, according to the bios that I read.
Oh my goodness. Okay, sorry, yeah. I got distracted. The second question.
I think this is an interesting tidbit, right? Exactly. The Saskatchewan Liberals were not really left of center when they existed, right? So
they were also not really much of a party. So I mean, you got to be to stick with them. Right? Wow. Okay.
You have 5 points out of 6, so this is pretty good. Okay. Next person, Eric. This person was born in 1934 in Brampton, Ontario. No, there's more. And was a son of a Methodist family. After moving to Winnipeg in his teens, he studied law at the University of Manitoba. In his early career, he was active in the Manitoba CCF and became the youngest party president in this party's history.
Okay, first of all, you said the theme was 18. So these seem to be all young politicians. So 1934 gets involved with the Manitoba CCF. So it's probably a future Manitoba NDP leader. So there's a few I could think of. And the one that would line up with the timing most might be Ed Schreier.
That's wrong, my friend.
Oh.
Clue number 2 for 2 points.
Oh, wait, I don't think he would... Okay, Methodist, I don't think would work out.
After several electoral defeats in unfavorable ridings for the CCF and then the NDP, this person was elected in the riding of Selkirk, just north of Winnipeg, in 1969, and served as Minister of Municipal Affairs in Ed Schreier's cabinet.
Then I'll just choose his successor, Howard Pauley.
And Howard Pauley is the right answer, my friend. Congratulations, you get 2 points. The last clue was, in the 1981 Manitoba general election, this person led the Manitoba NDP to victory, defeating Sterling Lyons Progressive Conservatives after a single term in power, and this person became the 18th Premier of Manitoba.
Oh, I see that. Okay.
So you
Bill
have
Davis,
7
Jason
points.
Kenney, and Howard Pauley. This is an interesting group.
Not bad, huh? So you have 7 points. What did I say?
9
okay,
was
so,
for gold.
So you got bronze already locked up.
Yeah.
And we go to our last person. You need at least to get it on a second clue for gold. Okay. Eric. This person was born in 1870 in Albert County, New Brunswick, and learned the sailor's craft from his father's shipyard. In the 1890s, he moved to Victoria, BC, and he worked as a ship's purser, accountant, and salmon cannery manager. He was first elected to the British Columbia legislature as a Liberal in the 1907 general election.
Okay, so he's a Liberal, and Liberal premier's probably a Liberal premier in the early... Salmon. So I'm guessing the first Liberal premier I can think of who might line up at that timeline would be Duff Patello.
And that is wrong, my friend.
Okay.
Okay, second clue for gold here. In the 1909 BC election, the BC Liberals were almost wiped out, the party being reduced to only 2 seats. But this person did retain his riding of Alberni on Vancouver Island. He was then elected Liberal leader in 1912, but shortly after, in the 1912 general election, he ran unsuccessfully in the multi-member riding of Victoria City. It was a disastrous election for the BC Liberals, winning a grand total of 0 seats.
All right, so now I got to choose an earlier Liberal premier, I think. So the other one that comes to mind would be someone who has a more famous name now, perhaps, but John Oliver.
And that is not right.
Ooh.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Missing out in gold.
Can you save silver here? All right. Third clue. In a dramatic reversal, the Liberals went on to win a majority in the next general election in 1916, and this person became the 18th Premier of British Columbia in 1916, but he died in office in 1918.
Oh. This is pretty niche. So this is a BC premier from over 100 years ago who was there for 2 years.
That's right.
The other one I can think of is John Hart, but I think he was there for longer than 2 years. But I can't think of another name, so I'm going to say it was John Hart.
Unfortunately, it was not.
Ugh.
So his name was Harlan Carey Brewster.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Brewster, yeah.
I've heard of him, but I was not going to pull that name.
So you get
that
7
was a tricky
points.
one.
That was a tricky one, yes.
If anybody from British Columbia or elsewhere gets that one, I think you should get the gold. That was a tough one.
You know what? I'm going to give you my bonus question. I'll give you 1 point if you get this bonus question.
Okay.
And you would then get silver. It's very simple. Who was the 18th Premier of Quebec? They were all the 18 premiers, which is surprising that the BC would get its 18th premier in the early 1900s.
They
changed a lot.
Every year or so. 18. Okay, let me think. There was a lot of premiers in the 19th century.
Okay, let me give you a very small clue.
Okay.
This premier, the 18th premier of Quebec, was before our time. But both my parents were born and could not vote when he was premier.
Okay.
That reduces it a bit, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Was it Duplessis then?
Duplessis was 17th.
Ah,
No, it was 16th. It was 16th.
Okay.
So
it was Godbout?
No. It was Antonio Barrett,
okay.
who was there for like 3 months. That's why
Jeez,
it was strange.
Louise. Okay, that's not easy.
That's not easy, but our members did ask you to make you sweat, so you get bronze on a very tough quiz. Congratulations, Eric. You had 3 of the 4 names, and the 4th one, was a bit of a very interesting bio, though. I did learn a lot about Mr. Brewster's, so... Okay, Eric, you survived this quiz. You get bronze. Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, let's do the number of the week. I'm going to take mine actually from the North Pole that we saw.
Okay.
About the NDP leadership. And it actually is more about the challenge that the NDP faces in the next little while, regardless who becomes the leader. So asked, favorable, unfavorable opinion of each of the candidates. Also, Mamdani, I guess, just for comparison. But also for Mark Carney. So people who are open to voting NDP so they could consider the New Democrats as an option when they go to vote. Mark Carney has a 68% approval or favorable rating, 23% unfavorable. leagues ahead of any of the NDP leadership contestants. So whoever does become the leader of the party will not only have to try to rebuild the organization, but will also have to convince a lot of their potential voters that they're the better option than a guy they like.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think that is going to be a big challenge for the NDP, regardless of all the discussion about how this is a progressive conservative prime minister, moving the party to the center right, not seeing that from center left voters who seem to be still pretty satisfied with Mark Carney. It goes back, I think it was on the bonus episode I said, I think people, it's more about vibes than it is about policy positions. And right now, Mark Carney's still vibing with center-left voters in Canada.
He is, but vibes, this is not like deep roots. Vibes are ephemeral and on the surface, so we'll see how long it lasts, right? I decided to go for my number of the week. I decided to go with a lighter poll from Léger. It's a survey of both Canadians and Americans about family gatherings. So, of course, I think this week is the U.S. Thanksgiving, right? And we have Christmas and the holidays coming very soon. And the question was, have you ever used a fake excuse to avoid attending a family gathering? Which I find it's so funny that we have polls on this. 45% of Canadians say yes, 55% say no, and so 55% I think are lying. And when we even have the breakdown, the regional breakdown, and would you guess which province has the highest amount of voters that said, yes, I've made up an excuse to avoid a gathering? Would you have a guess, Eric?
I don't want to insult anybody, so why don't you just tell me what the data shows?
I have it right here. So if we break it down, we see that, hang on, I lost it. It was Manitoba and Saskatchewan with 49%. So half of prairie voters made up an excuse to skip a gathering. The lowest was Alberta. So
all right, we can have anyway. Our viewers and our listeners tell us who they think is more likely to be avoiding family, Manitobans or Saskatchewanians who don't know from that poll. So fight it out.
Anyway.
Which one of them has more family drama? Okay. We
poll,
will not make any excuses to avoid our podcast listening family, and we'll be back next week, of course. We're still figuring out what we're going to do in the next little while in terms of our bonus episode, but we do have the leadership draft, the leadership resignation draft that we're planning to do next week for members of the podcast. So if you want to listen to that, you can go to thenumberspod.ca, sign up, you get access to Discord early and ad-free access to every episode every week. Got to do the promo every week, got to do it. This is got to pay the bills. But Philippe, looking forward to that and looking forward to chatting with you next week. And so have a good one.
Absolutely. Eric, talk to you soon. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Merci beaucoup, Eric. Have a great week.